Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Something that was so helpful in my therapy experience in 2025 was the reminder to keep going back to the evidence. Keep going back to what you know to be true. There are times when, for example, I feel anxious. I'm not sure I can handle challenges that are coming my way, or I'm nervous to take on something new because my mind can tell me I will never be able to accomplish it. And that's when my therapist will remind me to go back to the evidence I have, the times when I've had success in the past, or how I felt when I tackled something difficult. That evidence reminds me that I am capable of handling difficult things. Hey, it's Jen. This is the Bible for Busy People podcast, and we are talking about the Gospels this week. This Gospel was written drawing evidence from the Old Testament to prove who Jesus is. Each Gospel was written by someone with a different intention to a different audience for a different purpose. We talked about literary genres of the Bible this past year and how understanding the purpose and structure of the book helps us to better understand what is written in it. To misunderstand the context in which it was written, or even the intention for which it was written, is to misinterpret the message. What we know is that stories about Jesus were spoken for about 30 to 40 years until people started writing them down. Matthew's book is one of the earliest accounts, collecting the teachings of Jesus and the apostles and eyewitness accounts, including presumably his own. We don't know for sure who wrote the book of Matthew, but tradition points to Matthew, the former tax collector who was one of Jesus's disciples. And I find it interesting in the show The Chosen, we see the character of Matthew appearing as neurodivergent, observing and writing down his account as he goes. I really love this depiction of Matthew and his interactions with Jesus and the disciples, although we don't know what he was like in real life. I just love this idea that everyone was included, everyone was involved, everybody had a role to play, and no one was left out or excluded depending on ability. According to Overview Bible, Matthew makes the most references to the Old Testament, was well familiar with the Torah and traditions of the Jews, and bridges a gap between the Old and New Testaments. This is really important because it reached those who were practicing Judaism and needed more clarity on Jesus as the Messiah. The Bible Project sums up Matthew's goal as this: to show how Jesus is the continuation and fulfillment of the whole biblical story of God and Israel. Matthew focuses on Jesus as the Messiah from the line of David, Jesus as a new authoritative teacher like Moses, and Jesus as God with us, or in Hebrew, Emmanuel. He starts with Jesus' genealogy, setting up how Jesus is the descendant of Abraham, Isaac, Joseph, Judah, and David. Matthew significantly includes 5 women in this genealogy, and this shows so much of God's heart for women, and also how unlikely people are also included in God's plan for our restoration. We did a series on this in August entitled Matriarchs, and you can go back and listen to it. I really loved going through each of these women's stories. I found something new in each one. Matthew also is the only gospel to have the full, as we know it, cohesive Sermon on the Mount. We're going to read a little bit of that today, starting in Matthew 5, verse 3, which says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." The whole sermon really focuses on the upside-down kingdom of heaven, which runs contrary to the goals of this world. And notably, Matthew says kingdom of heaven instead of God to avoid disrespecting God's name, as in Jewish tradition. It also later talks about how Jesus is not replacing the words of the law, but fulfilling them. It really does show the transition of rote practice and memorization of the law to a heart that is fully transformed by knowing and being near to God, one that just exudes godly characteristics. And that's something I love about this Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is also the fulfillment of God's promise to humanity to rescue us from death, darkness, and destruction. If tradition is correct, this right here would be Matthew's conversion story in Matthew 9, verses 9 through 13. It says, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? On hearing this, Jesus said, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Matthew, in his account of Jesus' life, shows people being healed and restored to community, which is interesting because that would have been part of his story too. He also focuses a lot on Jesus' mission to send disciples out into the world to continue his work and meet people where they are, taking care of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs on the way. And then we have Matthew 11, verses 25 through 30, which is one of our favorites here on this podcast. We'll just start in verse 28 today. It says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. This shows how God is revealed through Jesus and the heart of God for us, which is to help us find rest from our efforts and rest in God. Matthew ends after the crucifixion and resurrection and the return of Jesus, with Jesus again sending out his followers to spread the message of the gospel. When I was growing up, we memorized this verse. We even had a little song, which I'm not going to sing it. But in Matthew 28, verse 18, it says, then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. This message resonates with us today. It's still Jesus' last words, and it's still our mission here on this earth. So did you learn anything new about Matthew today? We're going to be reading about Mark tomorrow, and I can't wait to talk with you then.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.